feature act of the evening is, as I said earlier, a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Tony Magee, the founder of this beautiful space and facility that we're hosting this event in this evening. I was commenting earlier that it really is, I think one of the largest just open spaces that I've been in, save for this little sanctuary up here. But it's a truly miraculous place here that they've created, all the way from the LED lights as you walk in, and and the neons, and just the beer that they're pumping out of here now. So cheers to Tony for making it all happen. Come on up.
Hey, Chris. Thanks. Yeah. Well, cheers to you.
Cheers. I might need another beer.
Yeah.
Tony, I love talking to you. I love when I get the opportunity to pick up the phone and call you, because I usually budget about like 15 or 20 minutes for a quote, and it ends up being like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And we usually end up having just like a really insightful conversation, and I always feel better after I hang up the phone. I feel like I've learned something, so hopefully everyone feels the same. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
I love reading your Twitter. I love hearing your thoughts on everything, so that's what we're going to do tonight. Let's find out your thoughts on the industry. I'm going to toss some subjects your way. Stream of consciousness. Tell us what you're thinking about things.
Okay.
But before we get there, let's just catch up a little bit on Lagunitas and what's happening here. The latest IRI numbers that I saw have you guys as the 16th largest beer vendor in the country, which is incredible. And you're up nearly 78 or 70%, both volume and dollar sales. How the hell are you doing it?
For the third year in a row.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. And we're doing the work that we do. We're kind of doing the stuff that we've always done since the start. There's very little about our brand strategy, if such a thing actually exists, that's changed at all from the first day. So it's kind of just a continuation of what we've always been. But what it seems like is, it took root, and now all of a sudden it's like the brand means something to people. People recognize it, and the beer tastes good, and so sales grow. It's sort of as simple as that. We're pretty diligent back home about having internal processes with our sales guys and with the marketing department, that we know that the things that we ask for are actually being accomplished. And so the sales guys, we give them a fabulous CRM that we built in-house ourselves, hired a great software writer, and he just wrote it on an iPad for us. And so the sales guys have great, strong tools to go to the world with, And when you go out there well armed, it's not that big a deal. I mean, the truth of the matter is, I have a feeling that the way we're growing actually represents how fast the category itself is growing. It's not as much as share gain as I think the way they calculate what share gain they accrue to us. They're calculating it wrong. They don't include like everything about consumer motivation in the sample that they pick. And so all of a sudden in the small, artificially small sample, they see us growing at 68%. But the truth is, it might be that demographic and the way people feel about the things that they will spend their money on has grown by 68%. So I think we're just riding a tide.
So the consumer's driving it, and you're out working folks out on the street. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, they accomplish what it is they set out to do, and stuff works. Distributors support it because I got actively engaged people in the trade, and that's not as common as it should be.
Right. So where will Lagunitas end up this year in terms of barrelage and distribution? I know you guys are entering some new states. You're taking a van around the country and doing some music actually up in Boston right now. So where will you guys be in terms of states and production this year?
Somewhere north of 500 1,000 barrels, maybe as much as 650. I've kind of lost track of the numbers because I have been doing another thing, but the business is going along a piece, so everything is as it will be. There's another brew house that's going to show up here in November that'll be installed and up by next summer, and it'll be needed. So this place is already almost running at capacity. So it's just a matter of just following the thread out for us, Yeah. So yeah, and I'm chasing the music stuff. That's kind of become that was my first life before brewing. It's the life that informed everything about branding and company and stuff, and now I'm able to get back to that a bit. So
yeah, the Black Joe Lewis is up in Boston tonight, and you guys are couch tripping, and you got some fun stuff going on.
Yeah, making all those connections. Some people would I think more cynically minded kind of marketing types would see that as like a good marketing play and really kind of an affinity building thing and making connections through music and stuff. But it's like really see it in a more primal way than that. And it's the way we've always seen it since the first day. It's not because that would be a manipulation. Well, this is what we want people to connect to. This is how we want them to understand us and apprehend the things. For us, it's just we have personalities, we've had life experiences, and we want to show people what it is that we think is cool, and in the hope that we'll find commonality with people. And
it's that gut instinct we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, well, but it's not about instinct of following a trend or even identifying a trend. It's just about being tapped into things that are primal enough, things that are fundamental enough to human experience, and then show it to people and go, this is who we want you to. This is what we want you to understand about us. And not only that, this thing that we're showing you that is what we want you to understand about us is better than us. This is the us that we would like to be if we could be somebody better than ourselves. It's straightforward.
So we were just talking a little bit about the Chicago marketplace, and obviously, you mentioned that you're getting another brew house in here to keep up with the capacity needs.
Right.
How has Lagunitas been received here since you guys laid down roots and moved into town? How's that experience been for you?
Crazy. Excuse me. Well, one of the things that since we announced this brewery, 4x plus our business has grown here, and that's inside of 26 months. So one of the things about Chicago is Chicago really loves its own selfness. It's a very self-aware city. When I left, and I met with the mayor, and I told him when I left the city, the only place you saw city flags were on City Hall and police cars, and that was the end of it. And now across the city, people build their brands around the city flag, and so there's such a civic pride that exists here. It's insane. So they really like and believe in things that are Chicago. That represent Chicago. And even though this plant, ships to 30 plus states, it's people in Chicago feel like it's theirs. Let them drive the bus. I'm all into it. It's cool.
Nice. So obviously the reason why I'm so excited to chat with you tonight is to kind of just get your thoughts on what's happening out there. And as I mentioned, I love to follow you on Twitter. And you've had some pretty interesting tweets about the M&A activity out there recently. And, I think that's an issue that's on everybody's minds. And everybody's always kind of curious to learn, what the next deal might be or where things are trending, where things are going. I guess one of the things that you said was you mentioned a private equity deal. And you had said, let's see if I have the quote here. Another small brewery owner had a liquidity event last week. Private equity money this time. There's always reasons. It's a beginning of the end, though. Flush with money, small will act big. It's only natural. And then you referenced Philip Morris purchasing Miller. You have the opportunity to explain and elaborate more than 140 characters. So, what does it all mean? What's your take on private equity and craft?
Well, you guys read all about all that, and you certainly all write about it when it happens, and everyone's looking for the next page in a story, but as if this is the turning point. And one of the things I spent a lot of time talking with my real smart, kind of MBA and better-minded guys that work at the brewery, is that you can't think of the business as any kind of an endpoint. You can't think of the industry in a status quo way. It's you're on a point in a curve, and with the trajectory of the slope of the curve and where it ends up, it's not something you can even know about. So you just want to stay on the curve. But there's this inclination to treat the industry as like a thing today, and this is the thing I want to address. But we're in our 21st, going in our 22nd year here, and it's like there's nothing about it now that would be recognizable to itself 5 years ago, or that date recognizable to brewers of 5 years before that. This thing is so fundamentally different than it ever was. And so, when you start making deals that involve, movement of equity, if you're doing it because it's your time to step aside, well, that might be the thing to do. But to do it in a way to grow and accelerate your growth, I think represents a bit of impatience. Now, I don't want to. There's no casting aspersions, get people thinking somebody did something wrong. That's why I said everyone has their reasons for doing it.
Right.
But when you bring in private equity, in particular, and that's like everybody has their eyes on private equity as being the thing that's going to change craft, and it would be a very, very destructive thing. Because beer is about multi-generational continuity. I mean, this is what people look for. I don't drink my father's beer. That's bullshit. People do drink. They think about what their grandfather drank. Is that beer still available? This is why PBR is getting its bump right now. And it's the idea of treating it like in the industry like a thing where you're going to sell off a bit of private equity money. Private equity is going to invest that. They all have investment horizons, 3 to 5 years, some of them 7 at the longest. Have to close the fund and resell, and it's things will change. And so at the brewery, well, of course things will change because the ownership has changed. But what happens when you have 100 craft breweries? 200 craft breweries, all with private equity money in it, all of them trying to create the value that they need to create so that they could spin it to the greater fool. That will change the texture of the industry.
Do you really think we'll get to a point where there's 100 different breweries taking on, massive amounts of private equity to grow?
Well, private equity will only invest in people that they think they can do something with. I mean, they have an obligation to the people that funded the fund. So, it's. But yeah, I bet there could be 100. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened very quickly once it starts too. I mean,
it'll probably be on a smaller scale than some of the deals we've seen recently. I would imagine.
I know from talking to some smaller brewers here, and they're having trouble getting money from banks. Banks are under all sorts of pressure. So where do you get money from? You have to get money to grow, and since this PE thing, happened last week, I probably really have gotten, 24 emails from some fucker on a Sunday night sends me an email saying, hey Tony, I represent a private equity fund there, and we have a lot of interest in your brand. We'd like to make an offer for your business. It's like you've seen the Blues Brothers, right? Where they go into Chez Panisse, and they're like, the women, how much for the women? I mean, it's like it has a lot of that. It's just like that. So
a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, no. And one guy I wrote back to saying, okay, I'll bite. How much you want to offer? And he sends back his long equivocation, and I was like, you're not even close, just on principle, because there is a number for us. It's 12.2 trillion. Okay, everybody has a number, and that's man. Yeah. So I told him he's not even close, and he wrote back saying, well, you should have a lot more sensitivity for inbound emails. You've now lost a customer. Is this live?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
well.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can't edit that one out.
That's right. That's right. So, but this is the impunity and the entitlement, the sense of entitlement that form of money encounters. And I can say this because we talked all the way to terms letters with 3 different private equity funds when we had to do a thing where we had to value the business to move a little bit of stock around. And I know exactly what these guys think. I mean, we know exactly what they want. And we bent them over as far as they would bend over, and they were going to take the deal. And then we told them to take a hike, stand up, pull your pants back up, and get it over with. But so this isn't like I'm just jealous. It's not that at all. But there were years when we couldn't find financing, and this is the important thing. As I said, these breweries that are having trouble finding financing from banks. I'm not surprised. You know, I took 18 and 21% application only over the internet leases, hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment I bought that way. Toughed it out, saw it through, so that the equity was mine when it was over with, you know. And then you still find things to spend equity on, like bringing in really smart managers, you know. But it's the most expensive financing you'll ever undertake, and you'll never get it back. So,
Well, certainly I think the risk nowadays might be even greater because of the competition that's out there than perhaps when you were taking out some of these.
risk for who?
The brewers, you know,
Yeah.
taking on 18 or 20% interest on some
Well,
of these things.
Well, hey, I took all that on in 1997. I mean,
And totally different landscape.
a landscape that was like, if it was today, that you wouldn't be having this event and nobody would be here watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, that year the CBC I think had the lowest. It was like 1,000 people showed up for the Craft Brewers Conference. You know, so yeah, that was when I did it. But you know, it's like there's an old Japanese idea that's like, you know, when business is slow, that's when you spend. When business is really good, that's when you try to save. It's exactly backwards from everything. But when shit sucks, it's like, you know, there's nowhere to go but up. And so you want to be one of the ones standing tall in it when that opportunity comes. And so we have been.
So a couple dozen emails from private equity folk. Gotta ask, I mean, what's a brewery go for these days?
Well, you can
what are they looking for? What's the multiple?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, because you know, they'll never talk about that. I mean, you know, until you get to the end. You know, it might be reasonable to say 12 to 15 for a fast-growing brewery, but that's, you know, of EBITDA. I mean, this isn't like top-line sales, and you still have to be earning money to. But you know, it's like, I mean, you know, what's that number compared to, like, you know, a business that lasts 150 or 200 years? You know, it's like, the multiple is kind of a boring number. You know, you're only ever going to see it once. You know, and nobody's going to pay you more than they think they can turn that number to 2x for themselves in 5 or 10 years. So, you know, it's just, even chasing the idea of a number like that is a fool's game. However, having said that, there's Pabst. They had
Right.
80 million in EBITDA, and sold for $1 billion, so there's 12.
Well, 7 to 750, but close.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
then
so
what
probably
even
more
12 then?
closer to like 9x, I think.
Yeah,
But
well, there you go. That's right.
yeah, I mean, and you know, just your thoughts on
I mean,
a
you know,
deal like that.
but they bought the company so cheaply in the first place,
Right.
Because Bernie Orsi, who ran the S&P thing, he's one of my shareholders. After he sold Pabst, he brought $500,000 to buy into Lagunitas just because he just wanted to still be in the beer business. He lives down the street from us, you know. And he said they just had to get rid of it, and it was so much money. It was like, what the fuck? Bring it in, yeah. They passed it out to the trustees or the, you know, the people of the trust.
So what do you think about a deal like that? I mean, Pabst is it's a company that's, you know, I guess a collection of somewhat interesting heritage brands, maybe to some people, and
Hey, you know what?
totally, I guess, counterintuitive to all the trends, and
Yeah.
you know, it's not craft, but yet here's a company that's getting 9x and getting 750 million.
That's right. You know, when Ted Turner bought the MGM library, it was considered this like vast archive of undocumented just litter, you know. And he was buying, you know, the Louvre of the United States. I mean, and you know, it's become huge because things that are old and have roots in the culture that everybody, you know, comes from, those things are valuable beyond valuable. You know, so yeah, in this moment in history, it doesn't seem like it's worth much. But wait till craft has played itself out, you know, and we're all actually really serious participants in the landscape, and you know, those brands come back, and maybe, you know, maybe Schlitz becomes Schlitz all over again. I mean, you watch the Dirty Harry movies. I'm not talking about the 50s. You know, watch Dirty Harry movies. He's drinking Schlitz in every scene. You know, every bar he goes into, there's a Schlitz neon on the wall behind him. So.
Do you see Lagunitas in that role ever? I mean, do you see,
Sure, yeah.
Do you see a Lagunitas beer in you know
Yep.
you know, a movie script?
Well, you might notice that we're here on movie sound stages. That was one of the benefits, you know. It's like I added that as a little bonus onto the rent. So yeah, we're working all the time getting our stuff into stuff. But this is what craft is. You know, craft isn't like you know, there's all these notions of specialness and stuff. Well, I mean, they're all nice ideas, and that we're building a thing, and that, you know, there have been, you know, stalwart pioneers that have created this land. The truth is, this whole industry the whole of the beer industry in the world, but it's beginning here in the United States, is being handed over to another generation of brands. It's as simple as that. And our job is just to catch the fly as it comes our way now. The fly ball out of the field. Just don't drop it, because it's coming to us. And so, the idea that those brands will all come back, it's inevitable. It's not something I worry about. It's like, well, yeah, that's going to happen,
And you just want to be one of those brands that's alongside them.
Exactly. I want to seem worthy of that spot, because those brands, I'm supposed to do this thing with the National Beer and Wine Wholesalers on the 29th, and they gave me a list of questions, and when one of them was like, who would you in the beer industry would you most like to have a beer with, And my answer is real simple. It's, Adolphus Busch the first, what the fuck was on that guy's mind that set a company so perfectly on a trajectory into the future, Yeah. Well, I don't know what happened later, I don't know anything about his children, I don't really care too much about it, but he was the inspiration that set the whole thing in action. He didn't die a poor man, like just barely having survived. It was his children that made the company work. He made one of the great breweries in the world right then and there, all by himself. So
I think maybe, 20 or 30 years from now, the folks over at the National Beer Wholesalers Association might be asking that same question to another craft brewer, and you might be the name that comes up for.
That's right.
Who would you like to have a beer with?
Hopefully, they'll be talking to the alive Tony Magee.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
So, one of the other interesting things that I noticed you remarked about on Twitter was some of the folks that are on your advisory board, and
cool.
I think. Hearing sort of secondhand, I guess, from you what they think about this industry is pretty interesting. I mean, you said you have the CMO of the biggest social media company, a marketing branding executive, a procurement expert for a big clothing company. How has this sounding board that you've been able to bounce ideas off of helped Lagunitas grow, and just what do they think about craft beer? What are they saying?
Well, I didn't want to tweet this, but talk about the Gap procurement and Facebook CMO and Landor Design and this other guy who runs Morgan Stanley Private. He's the managing partner of Morgan Stanley Private Equity. Ridiculous. I mean, being in a room with these guys is like being in the five of them. Their brains take up the room of 10 people. It's just unbelievable. But they're an advisory board now, and so they're only maybe with us the last 3 or 4 years. But they've been invaluable. And what they see in craft, the guy from Morgan Stanley Private Equity, he would buy Lagunitas in a heartbeat. I think he'd buy any one of a dozen breweries in a heartbeat, because private equity, it's the kind of investment they know they can make money on, because we've all succeeded in earning our place in beer in America. And the guy from Facebook, I said to him, Gary's a smart guy. I just said, I think beer is the original social media. Period. It's like you went to pubs, public houses. They got called pubs later. Beer is the original social media, and he completely saw that. And then we started talking back and forth. He spent 12 years at Google running Chrome and YouTube before that, and he was like, he liked the fact that our logo shows up in all these different fonts in the same way that the Google doodle comes up different every day. It's like the first law of corporate branding. They violate themselves on their homepage every day. It's like you break yourself out into a much larger entity. He sees craft as just reinventing the way beer is understood in America. Like the other brands, the big breweries, and this sort of existed in the past, but the big breweries of today is like they just overplayed their hand. They ran the thing out to its logical endpoint, and then they overplayed their hand, and now it's ours. And so Americans have been starved of this important cultural attribute for years and years and years. So
interesting.
So these guys are all psyched by it in every way. They can't believe it.
So I don't want this segment to be all Tony's tweets. So a couple of other topics that have been on my mind that I see people write about, that we write about. Just things that people talk about over a beer. One that you're pretty familiar with, starting a second brewing facility, or as it was, I guess, a couple of years ago, it seemed like it was trending towards bi-coastal breweries. So right. West Coast brewers moving east and having multiple facilities. Yeah. What's that process been like? Do you like the trend? Will we see more of it?
Well, you mean the process for us within the business?
Yep.
It was easy. I mean, this was 100 times easier than building Petaluma was. Petaluma took 15 years. This took us, 11 months. I mean, we learned a lot about it, and the idea of making the same beer in 2 locations, that's held up as a holy grail of difficult, kind of problematic. Why this can't work? Well, Bud has 12 breweries. I bet you every beer tastes exactly the same. So it's just a matter of controlling your process. If you don't have controls, it can be a nightmare. So we have a lot of controls. That's good. Scale brings the ability to develop control, and you only need the second brewery when you have scale. So as long as you've fulfilled all of the opportunities that are open to you as you grow, then these things become straightforward and simple, I mean, I was driving into work one day, realized we could do this brewery. I walked in, told my CFO, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he choked on his tongue. And I told my COO that was what we're doing, and he said, we have to do research, and I gave him 2 weeks. I mean, it was like just as simple as that, it wasn't like and then we started building. Bought a concrete saw, and we started cutting the concrete here, and off we went, But as far as a trend in the industry, I think it's inevitable. I mean, this I don't know if it's good or if it's bad. It's valueless that way. It's simply inevitable. If a brewery does well enough in multiple markets, after I did this, I thought, this is so great. I'm so smart. I can't believe I figured out how we could pay for this and all. And I'm driving into the brewery on Highway 80, and I drive by the Bud plant in Fairfield, California, going to Sacramento. And this place is it's a 3 million barrel brewery, and they're a 100 million barrel business. It's like clearly they're already doing it. So we're just all reinventing a wheel here. So,
so you think we will likely see more of this?
Yeah, it has
certainly
to.
We've seen it from the likes of Sierra and New Belgium,
and Oscar Blues, and now Stone, and
right.
Victory's got
but we're
a second
seeing it
one,
from some smaller players as well.
Yeah, and Brooklyn's doing it. I mean, they're building a second plant in the port someplace, and I was just reading about it. I mean, this is just natural. This is what's going to happen next. If the thing succeeds, there's going to be breweries like us all over the place. It should be that way.
Interesting.
And the local guys, this is going to be complicated for everybody. Because you don't want it to turn into assholes and elbows. You want it to be like lots of friendly kind of interaction, and so that's a tricky thing, and it has to happen right. So
that process will be interesting to see how people navigate that and manage that relationship as they move into a market and start laying down roots. Was that something difficult for you coming into Chicago with some of the locals?
I had no idea how it would feel. I know back in California, when we were small, if a bunch of big breweries from Oregon built their breweries in our backyard, I'd been like, what the fuck's happening? But then Pyramid did, and then Red Hook was gonna, and Gordon Biersch did. So you realize that it just is a thing that amplifies. Again, it's like, is the industry you're involved in, is it a fetus? Is it an infant? Is it going to college? And I think our industry is a zygote still. And so what happens between now and the next 10 years is going from zygote to the fetus stage, and then you can start making some guesses about it.
So still pretty young.
I think it is. I mean, what, 12%, 8% of all the beer sold in the United States? It's crazy. Imagine this times 10.
Yeah. Well, we'd be a fledgling. We would be the industry. Craft would be it. There wouldn't be a craft. It would just be beer.
We're gonna be, and when I see like, well, we declined all the city tax incentives here. When I see other breweries like applying for it and trying to get that stuff and trying to get special and getting states to compete and pass laws, it seems like we're becoming the people that we set out not to be when we first started craft breweries. But it's like, as the power gets handed to you, it's like, what do you do with it? Does it become your tool to kind of talk to the governor sideways about whether or not he's giving enough money, or is it an entitlement that you now have to earn a spot among the kings? So.
Interesting. I don't know if one might be in your mason jar there.
Daytime.
Yeah.
I've had 14 of these tonight.
Yeah. That's why this conversation's so good. Session IPAs.
Yeah.
Where do you see this trend going? Is it something that can stick? Do you like it?
Yeah.
Do you love it?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so everybody thinks that craft sources its volume from the big breweries and imports. Some from imports, some from the big breweries. I think about half of the volume in craft really comes from spirits and wine. And the desire for an individuation of experience, a stronger set of flavors, a little more alcohol, a more contemplative beverage, something that's an earned beverage rather than just like a commodity, fill my glass again. And so, so if we're really sourcing as much volume as I think we are from spirits and wine, these things will allow us to sell straight down into the belly of the Bud Miller and Coors of the world, because I mean, those beers have a place. There's a reason why beers are 4.5% beers are delicious. I mean, I'm in Arizona hanging out with my brother-in-law, and he's selling beer for us down there, and yet he's drinking Pacifico during the day, but he's got undercover down in the bottom of his fridge for the evening. So these beers are a necessary part of being part of the beer landscape. And like I said, these are going to allow us to sell right down into the bottom of Miller Coors. And I have a feeling over time, this will become our highest volume product or something very similar to this, while our flagship will remain IPA. But that's not so unusual. I mean, for Budweiser, their flagship product, I think you would have said, was Michelob during the 70s. But Budweiser was all of their volume, so.
Interesting. So we'll likely see more session IPAs.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the other issues that people seem to bring up often is just raw ingredients and potential shortages there. So
right. Session
that
IPAs.
might be getting down to the belly of the drinker, but do we have the ingredients to support that?
No, not at all. But we can, but craft brewers have to become more connected to the farmers that grow not only the hops, but also the malt. We just have to. We contract for barley now in the field before it gets planted, with some moving indexes for their cost of anhydrous ammonia and diesel and their other kind of movable inputs. And it's almost an identical model with the farmers and the hop yards. They have different problems because the plant stays there year after year. But like we have a farmer up there we were involved with. Last year we did 100 acres. This year we're doing another 200 acres of 600 acres of vineyard development and processing equipment. Because one of the big problems that this is the world of hops, okay, is the most opaque thing you'll ever get involved with. And so in a nutshell, though, it's like there's all these different hop varieties up there, different varieties that have different ripening windows. And there's a certain amount of processing capacity, meaning they can put a certain number of pounds of hops per hour through every farm's, all of their collective processing equipment. And every farm has its own because it has to come off the vine and get dried immediately or it begins to mold. And they do that. But the problem is that if the varieties are so sexy for craft brewers, all kind of ripen about the same time, which means there isn't enough processing capacity. See, because they need to have early ripeners into their machinery. As other things are becoming ripe, then they get to feed them in. And I don't know if you've ever had Simcoe hops that had a really oniony quality to them, They've just been on the vine just a little bit too long. And others have some other qualities. The different hops do different things. And so if you're really going to build your brand and the idea of the flavor of beer around hops, it's like, boy, there's no becoming involved enough in the valley up there. Our thinking is by 2018, 4 years from now, the craft will require all of the acres in all of Yakima Valley to be in production of aroma varieties only, which leaves almost no acreage at all for Bud Miller and Coors growing the CTZ varieties that they would make into extract. And I think Budweiser uses a certain amount of Centennial and Willamette too, but less and less. And I think they're going to move to extract. So it's like, what happens next? So when you see like Goose Island and Budweiser up there in their hop yards, and they invite a few writers up there, Budweiser's starting to realize it needs to, Anheuser-Busch, ABI, is beginning to realize it needs to start growing its own hops.
Getting more vertical.
Yeah, I mean, so the hop farmers have, not all together, but a certain important contingent within them has moved its focus now to craft as its future partner. As its future industry.
So the
huge.
The issue on the raw ingredients side for you, at least with respect to hops, isn't so much the actual growing of specific varieties and being able to get the quantities that are needed to sustain the growth of those beers, but the processing of those.
Well, the farmers will only plant things that fit the processing windows that they have available in their machinery. So
it's sort of both.
If you want them to plant more Citra, they got to know they have the processing capacity.
So maybe some of the private equity guys that are calling you should call up the hop farmers and the processors.
They probably should be talking to farmers. Yeah. But the farmers, these are family businesses, literally dozen generations, I say dozen, 6 or 8 generations old on their own farms. And everybody up there is related. Everybody's a cousin or somebody's brother married somebody's sister, and they're not taking money from anybody. So when we do our deals with them or joint ventures with them to develop hop yard space and now this entire processing farm unit of 600 acres, it's we're doing it with them by paying more for our hops every year. to defray the costs of the development. So we pay them a premium, and then the idea being, down the road, that's our hop yard.
Right.
And they will supply us out of that hop yard,
Interesting.
So it's not trying to corner anything. It's not trying to cut off supply to others. It's actually trying to create new capacity that serves us, and since we're paying for it, we're hoping that we have access to it. But it's like everybody needs to be that involved. And I think every brewer, craft guilds within states could get together and do these same things, that every farmer up there needs to be hearing it.
Seems, like a pretty innovative take on just the vertical approach. I mean, you're not actually owning these farms, but
we're trying to
you're
take the risk.
investing on behalf of them.
We're trying to take the risk out of it for the farmer.
Right.
It's just about risk sharing, And then some of the farmers that are growing certain hops, they'll underproduce because they have an under or over, and so they'll underproduce so that they don't accidentally overproduce and not be able to sell it. And so we've offered a lot of the farmers puts, in a way of thinking, where if they overproduce, we will buy it.
Right. Okay, so we got time for one more question, because I do want to leave some time for people to hang out and have a beer and just chat with each other. That's one of the reasons why we host these things. National craft brands. That'll be my final question. You're sort of getting there to being a truly national brand. I think in name and perhaps the way people perceive you, or just the way people recognize the Lagunitas IPA brand and imagery. You're national, but you're not in all 50 states. How many national craft brands can there be? And, what do those companies look like as they grow and as more craft companies become truly national?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's I built this brewery to be this big because I didn't have a picture of building another brewery back here, So this would be what I thought we would ever sell in the eastern United States. But there's a good reason for me to build a 200,000 barrel brewery in Charleston, Carolina. Why not? There's a market there to be had. There's relationships to be made. So I think other brewers may do things like that. I think that the Oscar Blues place in North Carolina is 75 or 100,000 barrels. It's not so big, And so there's going to be a lot of national brands. But if you take the U.S. beer industry is 200 million barrels. Take 100 million of it, give it all to craft. You could have a lot of really big breweries underneath that tent,
So 100 brewers taking private equity, a lot of brands going national, 100 million barrels to craft. Some lofty goals you've set out.
Well,
the industry's got a long way to go.
Yep. That's a lot of open field running right now. I think any idea that anything we're doing is part of a mature industry it's a little myopic. The future is bigger than that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of just seeing programs on like National Geographic or anything about when you take a look at the universe, and then they pull the picture out and they show just how big the entire world of space is, and a tiny little sliver of that is the world that we exist in.
That's right. And when we started making our IPA back in '95, the idea was that this world is bigger than we see it to be today. And I want to set myself up to be part of what will come next, not what's happening right now.
Huh. So, interesting. Yep. Well, Tony Magee, everyone, how about a round of applause? Does anyone have any questions for him? If you do, we can pass around a microphone. If not, you can ask him secretly off camera and pick his brain. Shoot up your hand if you have a question. No?
You. There's nobody over there. I just thought. You. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all. Oh, Molly's got
Molly,
a question.
Yeah.
Oh.
What's your biggest brand, and is it the same brand every year?
Yeah, the IPA is 54% of our business. It's kind of stayed there for the last 10 years,
Do you consider it your flagship, or doesn't that matter for you?
Flagship, it's the sharp point on the end of our stick. It's always been that, and it's a way for us to kind of handle for people to pick us up by.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we got more.
All right.
All it takes is one.
Tony, you mentioned trends in the industry. Cans are becoming more prevalent in the craft brewing industry. Can you give us your thoughts on cans for Lagunitas?
Well, tell you a little story instead. Like, back when we began in '94, we began bottling, it was wheat beers were the biggest, most important thing that was happening in craft beer on the West Coast, where things were, a little less developed than they are here. And so this is a growing market still. The things are still coming a long way here. Craft's a relatively small share in Chicago, and so it's still a long way to go. It's the coolest thing. So I can make a wheat beer, could make a fruit wheat beer. Oh, that's even better, And all of these breweries were making honey wheat beers and fruit wheat beers, and I would never make even one of them, because they didn't seem to me they seemed to me to be trends. The difference between, or it seemed to be fads rather than trends. And so I just thought, well, I can always make one later. We're going to make the things we believe in and go with that. Glasses. I'm trying to, I like to think of beer as a Bronze Age industry, and glass is ancient, and there's something about glass that still, I think, remains the highest quality perception, the way to deliver, a product. There's a lot of pride involved in glass. Glass is way more expensive, and so, cans are interesting, and they could have a wheat beer, fruit wheat beer, honey wheat beer quality to them, and a can is just not as easy a billboard to build for brand identity on a shelf. Some of them are very nicely done and very recognizable, but it's a harder place to play. With a six-pack carrier, I have a nice billboard. So having said that, traditionally, and this assumes that the future will be something like the past, cans are an end game strategy. They're a way to drive volume. And so in the same way, like punk bands turned, inspired amateurism, and threw it in the face of all of the pretty music that's happening at the time, it's like cans are kind of like punk in that way, and it's cool when you use it as your primary branding. But when the package becomes part of your branding, I worry a little bit about it, Glass to me is supportive of the branding. In some ways, the can's a little bit further forward. For a while, we did Frank Zappa beers. I was doing his album covers, and we did 5 of them, and Gail Zappa got upset with me, but I was glad when it was over because it began to dominate some of the brand identity, So, so we'll wait on cans. I have bottling lines over there. There's a second bottling line that's going to be coming in next summer, and then there's another bay up front there where I could put a 1,000 can a minute line, and we will, someday, but it's down the road, when we're growing 68%, it's like, why would I want to do cans, And if next year we grew at 30%, which would be wonderful, why would I want to do cans, I think there's still a lot of open field running. Craft is a very young thing right now. So, I'm waiting for pouches.
Craft pouches, baby.
That's right.
The wave of the future. All right, well, Tony, thanks.
Yeah.
It was great
Right,
having
right.
you. If you guys
Likewise.
have more questions
Yeah,
for
thanks.
Tony, hit him up. I know we had maybe talked about doing a little brewery tour for some of our guests.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you're still interested in that.
Yeah,
but,
if you want to walk around, yeah.
That offer might be on the table. We can walk around the catwalks a little bit. One last shout out and thank you to our sponsors, OY and Beer Run. Thank you guys for attending Brew Talks. We'll be in Austin next month, so hopefully you guys can tune into that on the live stream. Thanks for coming out. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.